afternoon, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. I hope that you're keeping well and safe in these trying times. Take your glass of hot water if you can and enjoy this plate of knowledge that we are about to serve you. My name is Lucy Maina. I work with Springboard Capital, and I'm the branch manager at our Thika branch. Springboard Capital hosts monthly webinars every last Friday of the month, geared towards sharing knowledge with all business owners. It's increasingly becoming imperative for business owners to take a proactive stance in taking control of security and safety for business sustainability. This involves recognizing potential security and safety risks and threats to their businesses by both mitigating and managing them. The current national environment calls for being one step ahead to create a watertight plan to mitigate loss and secure personal, customer, employee, and business premises safety with urgency. In a constantly evolving environment, business owners who commit to learning new skills will be better placed to adapt to change and keep their businesses going in challenging conditions. Our interactive sessions are designed both for new and established business owners. In all cases, the objective is to build the business owner's capacity to successfully learn and grow their businesses. I'm honored to host you in this exciting session, dubbed Security and Safety Preparedness for Business, Risk Mitigation and Recovery Strategies. Our speaker today, who is a security and private investigative consultant, shares knowledge on 1, how to conduct threat assessment to identify potential risks to your business. 2, how to create an emergency response plan for security or safety incidents. And 3, how to respond in real time to different emergency situations that may arise. At this juncture, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce to you our speaker of the day, Chris Otieno, who is the lead consultant, managing partner and founder of SATE East Africa Limited. He's a renowned investigator, an international speaker on subject matter security analysis, providing insights and analysis on today's changing security environment to leading healthcare facilities, large medical supply chain institutions, agribusiness entities, and security and safety services institutions, as well as individual businesses. He's a master's graduate of Leicester University in the UK, a bachelor's degree graduate from Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, a member of International Institute of Security Management, ISMI in the UK, a director, partnership resource mobilization at Kenya Professional Society of Criminologists, a member of Proactive and Safety Association of Kenya, a diploma holder from National Examinations Board on Occupational Safety and Health, UK, and paralegal graduate from Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. Mr. Chris Otieno, please take it away. The floor is yours. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Thank you very much, Springboard. Thank you very much to all of those who have joined us this afternoon. I am really glad to be here. And just like Lucy has said, your network is your network. So I am really glad to take part in this webinar, and I really welcome you for us to just go through what is required for us to safeguard our businesses and to proactively protect our businesses from all the risks that face us in the current world, in the current business economy, and in the current global scenarios that keep developing on a day-to-day basis. So I am really proud to sit here and work with you, go through this together so that at the end of the day, we are all very, very prepared and live to what is happening around. So allow me to take to the podium and just present the purpose of today's meeting. Like our able moderator has mentioned or has said, our purpose today is to go through security and safety preparedness for our businesses. And across the divide of each and every person who's seated here, we have a business to run. We have a part to play in our business. We have we have budgets to run our business. And today we want to bring another element that is worthy of being considered when we're doing our business planning, when we're doing our business budgeting, and when you're relating in the world out there. So thank you very much So we know that security and safety have a very thin line to draw between them. And if you want to run your organization right, the first thing that is important for you to know are the threats, the risks, and the vulnerable points that your business is exposed to, for you to be able to seal them off, for you to be able to apportion part of your budget, to be able to come up with procedures, policies, and steps and actions that you need to take to enable you, seal all these areas that might really drive your business to the other end. So if you want to conduct a threat assessment, if you want to go through this, it's a process, a 4-step process. And this diagrammatic is showing on the display there just tells you that the first one is to identify these threats. So we'll go through how to conduct or how to identify these threats. The next then will be to assess the threats. Once you've identified the threats, what next do you do is an assessment. Your assessment can either be qualitative or quantitative. In quantitative, you attach a numerical value each and every risk that you've identified, and that helps you to categorize them. And after categorization, then you can determine from a budget apportioning what amount of money, what amount of resources you will require to handle those threats and risks in a certain way, right? Then also as you budget, there are things that you'll have to think of across the divide. What are the best controls that I need to develop so that I am able to prevent my organization from having risks crystallizing in them? Let's take, for example, in the finance department of the organization, the best thing to do is segregation of duties. That is a control that organization-wise, as a strategy, internal control, internal audit department, they too have there, right? For you to be able to really have a good control on the control that you require to be able to run your organization solidly and safely in preventing these risks from crystallizing. Lastly, you'll have to look at evaluation responses. Time and again, when risks crystallize, and we're going to look at illustrations down as we proceed on with our presentation. As the risks crystallize, you will respond. And after responding, it's quite important to sit down, have a sit down with your human capital and go through what are the best practices that we did? What are the gaps that came up? What areas do we need improvement? If we were partnering with somebody else, what are we seeing that person having brought on board as either best practice or what gaps did you see that what we need to move forward? So when you go to the next slide, which I ask our IC to go to the next slide, you will see that you start your threat assessment from the point of risk assessment. I've just mentioned a few things, items that need to do up there. And important is risk identification. So up there, you see that there are methods that you'll have to adapt for you to be able to tell that, yes, I have done my risk assessment pretty well. And after doing my risk assessment, I am leaving no areas of vulnerability in my exercise, right? So risk identification, risk estimation, risk evaluation, risk treatment, and risk acceptance. At this point, this might seem like very big terms or terminologies. Many of us who will not interact with these terms could be asking themselves, what is Chris talking about, or which area are we going through? We'll see this in the next slide. But the entry point in your threat assessment is risk assessment and risk identification. And this is how we do it. In this area, in this particular section, that we label pre-event actions or engaging a consultant or engaging a human capacity, internal capacity. The first step here is for you to plan. How am I going to carry out my risk or threat assessment? I know that in my organization, I have several capacities. And one capacity is an internal capacity in terms of human capital. The human capital that I have in my organization, they're quite cognizant of what happens in their department. And when they sit down, even not in a structured way, they could be saying, this is risky. This is something if I do will bring this. If this happens, they would stop my operations from proceeding on, or something along those lines. Then these are brought into table, written, and then brainstormed. We brainstorm around these things, ask these departments, why this and not that? Why do you feel that this can stop our operations? Or why do you feel that this one can negatively affect our operations? And you'll find that the capacity you have there, right? They'll know a lot of this in retrospect, but when it comes to now putting it from a risk perception point, they will need capacity to be developed, which probably will include you bringing a consultant like ourselves to do this. When we come in, or when a consultant comes in, or with the internal capacity, you develop checklists. This checklist will enable you to tick boxes and say, this has been done, or this has not been done. right? For what has not been done, you make sure that you go through it to enable you assure or attain that maximum capability where you have no risk of vulnerability that has been left behind that could turn out to be something for you in the future, right? Then assumption analysis. If this were to happen, this will be the result. If this happened, this would end, this would take us this direction, or this would stop our operation from this perspective and this perspective. That is also another area, another prevent action that you take, right? Cause and effects. At some point, incidences happen in an organization. When we investigate these incidences, we come and ask ourselves, what caused this incident? Is it lack of a segregation? Is it lack of proper maintenance? Is it lack of us being able to comply with the tax regulation or tax requirements from the tax regulator or something like that? Then what are the effects? Once you put that in a nutshell, then it can really enable you, or it can give you a perspective of how you respond to the questions that are there on our right. What risk does my business face? How will they affect my business? How likely are they to occur? Why is my business most vulnerable? What losses are associated with the risks that, if they crystallize in my organization, I would be faced with? What can I do to prepare myself against these kinds of threats and risks that can happen in my organization or are beyond my organization, but I need to prevent myself against them? How can I mitigate the impacts of these risks? How can I reduce the likelihood of having to shut down? Or if I am to shut down, what costs will I face? So these kinds of questions facing us then definitely says that when we need to move to step 2, and step 2 takes part of what we did in step 1. And in step 1, when identifying the risks, you have to follow through a procedure, which is 4 W's times 1 H. What are 4 W's? It is what, where, when, why, and the 1 H is how. If you can be able to answer these questions systematically and in detail, then we are saying step by step, you're progressing yourself into being able to conduct a very in-depth risk assessment, which will give you some fruits as we proceed to see that. Then you also mentioned in our cyclic approach or the cyclic strategy for risk assessment, we say we have to do a risk analysis. Now, defining the term risk analysis, like I said, it could be a big word to some of us who have not interacted with risk management. So risk analysis is basically establishing the probability of a risk event occurring in my organization and what the potential impacts. Look at what is happening now in our Kenyan domain, in our Kenyan environment. Every Thursday and every Monday, the opposition has called mass demos. What are the risks that are associated with what is being called around here? That is part of the analysis. If we say my shop is in CBD and the probability of my shop being vandalized or property being in my shop being damaged, what is the probability of that? We say the likelihood is 5 or 4, and the impact, if it happens, would be 5 because the amount of money I'll need to. So we say that is a 20. We give it a qualitative matrix of 20. Then that means in my end that I need to allocate a lot of resources or quite substantial amount of resources to prevent myself from the impact that will come from these political violences. Right? Then evaluation. In evaluation, just what I've mentioned, by giving an empirical figure, all the risks, then we look at a value for each risk. You find that some risks have a risk value about 25, impact is 5, likelihood is 5, or 20, impact is 5, likelihood is 4. That is the evaluation that you have. That gives the option to move the next step, treatment options. If my risks are at 5, then it means those are severe indices for my risk. Then what do I do in there? I need to locate the right resources to prevent it, and this has to be done in an urgent manner. Or if I was budgeting, then I say this must be done in Q1 when finances are available, so that I may be able to run with that safety mode or safe mode throughout to the end of the whole of that financial year. Then also, as we proceed on in our step 2, we conduct risk monitoring. What is risk monitoring? We know that risk management is a non-stop process. We continually manage these risks, right? There is a repeated and continual monitoring of this process to ensure that we are maximally covering either risks that are inherent to our business or risks that might emerge from what is happening outside of the business. So we keep our eyes open in terms of risk monitoring and risk review. So let's look at, for example, planning and preparedness, sectoral risk identification. you will see that every sector of our economy, which of course our business are in, for all those in attendance in this webinar, that our risks are in all these sectors of our economy. For example, if right now you're in the agriculture and forestry sector of our economy, then we say you have risks that are either emerging or inherent in terms of human capital, in terms of production and environment risk, and in terms of human and personal risk. And we can look at what happened with the teas in what they were saying, the cost of our tea. Look at the kind of risks that came in there. Ethical risks that are more personal related, that are more personal risks. But the impact was global and really affected the market for that particular organization, not to mention it. If you're in the energy and mining sector of our economy, then geopolitics becomes a crucial risk for you to consider. Uncertainty in terms of demand. Today we are discussing a gold haze at JKIA. We don't know what happened, right? So I am thinking from where I'm sitting as a risk manager that the person to whom that gold belonged should have done a risk assessment and probably considered in mind that there could be uncertain demands, which includes theft of these items because of a demand outside to where I'm taking them, right? Workforce requirements, licenses to operate, new business models, digital innovation, all these, you consider them as you think through your risk process or what you're saying, a threat assessment, if you want to have a holistic approach, look at your business. If you're in the manufacturing sector, intellectual property protection becomes a critical aspect because this is my product. There is what I do to make this product a complete finished product. If somebody else were to steal my intellectual property, then I'm saying probably this will be duplicated somewhere else. And then my competitive edge in the market becomes very difficult because I did not take care. I did not find a way to cover up my intellectual property protection, either by patenting it or putting some rights into my products. The effects of automation. Let's take, for example, in the tea manufacturing, which combines both agriculture and manufacturing. When we see now that automation is coming up in terms of tea picking, we are moving from the human labor to machine picking of tea. What does this have to do with us managing organization to prevent effects that could come in there and really jeopardize or bring in imbalance in terms of our image and the brand and types of, and how we relate to the community around us. And the supply chain interaction, sorry. These are important risks that you need to consider when you're running a business if you are in the manufacturing sector. If you go to the next sector, in our next slide, which is in tourism and hospitality, what do we look at? These are travelers, people who come to enjoy the scenic beauty of our country and other things, right? They want to enjoy themselves. So what do we look at if you're in that industry? If you are in the hospitality and you're running a business, liquor liabilities. What are the liabilities that are there? What is alcohol control regulator talking about the liabilities? In the event that my visitors have food contamination, how will this affect my brand? How will I get my brand back? Because my brand dictates or talks about the number of customers who will come and run with me. If I am running a tourism transportation and I'm doing an excursion from JKIA to, for example, Lake Bogoria, somewhere in the middle of Rift Valley, if a traffic accident were to happen along the way and I've got injuries or I've got fatalities, what does that mean to my business? What is my reputation or my operational risks out there? If you're in the financial sector and services, market, credit, liquidity, operational and legal risk will have to be risks that you consider. If you're in the healthcare, Medicare, how am I packaging my product? If you're in the medical, if you the same sector, how am I managing my records because of privacy and confidentiality that's attached to them? And patients' rights, what rights do patients have? They have a right to privacy. So if I'm going to install my security systems, we must allow that doctor-patient privacy and the patient privacy, right? And these are kind of the looks that we're saying we need to identify for us to be able now to come up with a document that we're calling a threat or risk assessment to our organization. Then, if you're in the next sector of our economy, for example, transport and infrastructure, look at what is happening right now. The weather, we spend a lot of time praying to the Almighty to bring us rain. The rains have come, and they have come with a lot of disasters here and there. Flooding, we've had a lot of things in Kawangware and Nairobi, and outside Turkana there in the rivers there, and things that are happening there. So how do I note this risk in my operation? How do I prevent it? For example, I could look at, for example, changing my program. If I know probably the rains come around this month, then I make sure that I don't invite a lot of my guests during that time. I move that bulk or volume of my business to other months that there is no this kind of disasters to protect my image and also ensure that my clients get the best out of Kenya's scenic beauty. If you're in the building and construction industry, and this has been affected a lot in our country, falling buildings and things like that, these are from incomplete drawings of well-designed scope of what the contractors have to do. These are risks, if you're in that sector of our economy, that you must protect yourself against. You must identify them and come with a plan on how to make sure that they are mitigated to as low as is reasonably possible, which if we don't do, then we become a statistic in the count of the number of buildings that are fallen down, and we become statistic in the number of businesses whose reputation is towards zero, which we don't want. Everybody wants a prosperous business. So there must be that sitting time that we sit to identify this risk and come up with plans of how to manage them. Information and communication technology, if you're in that sector, cybersecurity is becoming an issue. Theft of client identity, client information is becoming an issue. Banking sector, for example, if you look at this, if you look at what is happening in the global market, this has affected very big entities. And the repercussion has been loss of clients. Majority clients are moving out because they're saying your systems are not protecting my details. Because these details, when they are stolen, they'll be exploited and there'll be loss and loss of losses. We can remember what happened to Usain Bolt, the fastest runner in the world. What happened to his investment in one of the investment companies out there in his home country. That is a reason that have to be identified and proper structures put in place to identify them. Right? So once you have all these in place, then we say you are ready for the next step, because you have a global outlook of what is facing your organization. And now if you have that, the next thing is now to sit down and plan. Over to you, Lucy. Thank you very much.
Yes, Chris, thank you so much. Wow, that was a very interesting and very real conversation with especially with what is happening in our country. And I'm sure our customers can resonate, and there's so much food for thought. My take home is from your conversation is that as business owners, we need to be aware of the risks that we could face in our businesses, know how to respond or mitigate, and how to bounce back as soon as possible without much damage, and remaining relevant in our respective sectors, regardless of the happenings in our surroundings. And this will involve a lot of planning ahead. Yeah, Chris, would you be willing to share the presentation with the entrepreneurs so that they can revise and think in all the good things you have taught us today?
Definitely, we will do that. We will do that.
Okay, thank you so much. To our audience, we are waiting for your question on the chat box. I'm sure we have a few minutes that we can pick a few questions, Chris.
I have a question.
Yes, Carol?
Yeah, I am even in transit, but I could not miss this presentation.
Yes.
We are very anxious. The question is to Chris. We are very anxious as businesses because of the Monday and Thursday national situation. What could we do to calm our anxieties? I know there's things beyond our control, but from a risk management perspective, it's quite something. So from an expert opinion, what could we do to calm our anxieties? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Madam Kara, for that very good question, right? The question that fits the current environment where we are in. That takes us to the next part of our presentation this afternoon, emergency planning, right? With what is happening around our country, as a business owner, as a human capital in any business that is being run in this country, your next priority is to plan for a risk or plan for emergencies. When these risks crystallize in an organization, they come as emergencies when they are not properly planned for. So after identifying all your risks and after conducting a risk assessment, a threat assessment of your organization, the next item that you move to now is planning a robust emergency preparedness plan. How am I going to plan myself now that I have this information? And when you get to this particular point, you realize that there are 4 things that must be done, and they are cyclic. The first one is preparedness. How do I posture my organization in terms of preparedness? If it is fire risks, then there's a regulator statement on fire risk reduction, which is an act of parliament, 2007, Then I need to adhere to regulatory requirement, and also I need to add up innovative ways that will speak to my organization itself on how I prepare myself. Once I have that, then what is my next thing, right? Is to respond and mitigate. How do I mitigate the risk of fire? How do I mitigate the risk of political violence that is currently happening in our country? What do I do? Now that I identify the critical items for me to be able to secure my business. Now we go now to what we need to do. Number one item that we must do is develop a plan. And our plan will purely entail policies, procedures, strategies, and actions that we must take for us to prevent ourselves. Let's take now this political risk. The first thing that we have now is that we know there's a program that will be followed by severe followers in their mass their mass demonstrations. What risks are in mass demonstrations? There is mugging, there is property damage, there is violence, and there are fatality in the extreme cases. So with those in my mind, how do I plan myself to include traffic disruptions? If I want to avoid being in a mugging situation from these political demonstrations, then it requires me to stay away from the routes that they will take. I have the information, they're going to take this route, so I avoid that route completely. If I have the information that this route where my business is located are going to be used by demonstrators when they are demonstrating against the 3 items that they are fronting to the national government, then what do? I need to adapt some preventative to include baseline security measures that ensures that, yes, I am safe and my business is safe. And when these mandamanos are over, I easily roll up my roller coaster and I'm back to business and nothing has been damaged, isn't it? So after that, then what do? We build a team around our plan. And this team must first of all include a team leader. You'll find us calling this person in security terms, incident commander. This is the person who bears the responsibility of the entire organization in terms of responding to this emergency team. Then below this person, we'll have another consultative structure that has other people who must plug in so very well and into this response emergency plan to enable us. Once we have activated, if you're going to look at the 3rd section of our presentation, they know exactly what to do. And how do I bring this capacity to the level of everyone knowing what to do? Is to train my team. I identify security. What will security do? Marketing. What will marketing do? They could do something like be the contact between ourselves and the media, because media also want information. If you keep them out of information, something else could happen. The police will want to come, for example, record statements and do the normal police procedures. Who will be responsible for these police persons when they come? Who will be responsible for the press persons when they come? Who will be responsible for the family of those injured when they come? And who will be responsible for the several areas that are going to be critical in our handling of this emergency? So once we've done that, all right, then we need also to determine our modes of communication. How do we communicate with the family? We must be careful on how we structure our statements to the family and to the media, because that also has an effect on our brand. Yeah, so our communication must be communication from experts, right? We could even have guys who do imaging to really handle that for us, so that we ensure that we don't crystallize the risk of a reputational damage to our organization, right? Then there must be also people who are responsible for accounting for people, fire marshals, for example, or emergency response teams are portioned in our plan, and their roles and responsibilities very well spelled out. They must be ready so that when we go to the next step, where we're activating our emergency plan, then everybody plays the right part. And at the end of all this, when we stand down the response, then we are saying our image remains stable. It actually adds another plus and plus to ourselves because of how we handle the whole emergency, isn't it? Then it's also important that for us to bring our emergency plan home, there must be what we call intermittent drills or periodic drills. What are these? These are just an emulation of, in the event of an active shooter in our premises, what do we do? Right? All staff must be trained. This is a Sautia risasi. When you hear Sautia risasi, what do? You don't do the Kenyan traditional thing of going to look at what it is first before you take action. No. The immediate action required of you, ni kwenda chini, all right? Akulala flat. Ama, adopting some other measures that we can discuss out of this, just to harden the organization, right? And at the end of that, I want to repeat what I said in our assessment. You must evaluate what you have done. Have we done the right thing, or have we not done the right thing? So let's look at the next slide. what is there in the next slide and how is it that we prepare an emergency plan, all right? So when you think of the future, or when you think of any emergency, then the first bell that you must subscribe to or must ring in your head is appropriate preparedness planning. And these are the areas, all right? Telephone or internet, we build scenarios. If, for example, today, telephone or internet stops working in the middle of a busy day, in our organization, it's end month. You want to do reports to the regulator, you want to do reports to the owner of the business, you want to do reports to the shareholder, and telephone internet just goes down, and we are running on an ERP system, then it basically means that our business is going to be interrupted, completely interrupted. So what do we do to be able to prevent this from really disrupting our business level that we can't operate? Then it's time to think of an emergency plan. And an emergency plan here would be a redundancy site or a generator to power all our systems so that we go backline, or the ability to be able to continue with our business offline. Now, in this wake of political unrest and demonstrations that Madam Caro asks, right? And somebody comes and takes advantage of that and burglars your premises, yeah? What do you do? How do you prevent yourself? Because you identify this as a possible risk in the first section of post-prevent. What do you do, right? You plan hardening of your organization. If there's a power failure that lasts for days and days and days, how do you plan it? How do you plan to wait around that, right? If you're unable to use your workplace because of a fire, how do you plan that? So in your risk assessment, your threat assessment, these are the scenarios that you're required to build in your mind so that you are able to sit down and come up with the kind of plan that are protective, proactively protecting your organization so that we don't fall down to the impacts that could come with this, all right? So summarizing this is we create a list of critical functions in the order of importance. Let's, for example, say that this webinar goes offline right now. Would be the first action for us to take is to call ICT, ask them, hey, what is happening? What is the next action by ICT? To call data services provider, KDN, what is happening? And then that comes back. And then, it goes back again, and we come up with the plans on how to mitigate that. So planning time is critical. Have an overview of what could happen to you, and then plan a response to them. Next slide tells us the next thing that we have to do, right? So our contingency plan is important in your emergency plan. If this happens, what am I to do? I am a customer-based service organization in the finance sector, in the healthcare sector. Who are my most important customer suppliers, shippers, and vendors for them to be able to come in and help me in recovering as fast as is possible for me to go back to normalcy? How do I communicate to them when my phones are down? Yeah, do they have a contingency plan for me? Do they take care of me? So guys in procurement, this would be some of the same areas that you need to look at when you are contracting new suppliers. Do they have a contingency plan or continuity plan in the event that things go Timbuktu, or things go in the other direction, right? And if they don't have, if at the time of need we call them and they're available, what do? We must have a list of alternative suppliers who can come in handy to support us. So that in the event that our staff are in the office, and out of the blue, these demonstrations come right next to the offices. What do? How do you advise our staff to do? There must be a plan B that we put in place, or a plan in the emergency response area to enable us to wade through, right? And like we said, next slide tells us the real actions that must be done, isn't it? Just like business leaders invest a significant amount of time, money, and resources to make their ventures a success, then we must also need to plan for disaster scenarios in our business to make sure that, yes, our business is protected, right? And when you put up an emergency plan, what are we saying we are being exposed to? What are we doing in terms of protecting ourselves? Number one, we are raising the level of awareness. We have this thought, identification. We have this plan in place, and we do drills or emulation of what could happen. So in the event that they happen, we are at the advantage point number one. There is no element of surprise here, is that our staff know what to do. So when we trigger our response plan, every staff knows what to do, and we save quite a number of lives in our response, right? The next thing is prepare for the risk events. We will be ready for it. We are aware and we are ready for it. When it comes, we respond appropriately, right? Next thing, we'll strengthen our business in terms of response capability. We can respond and respond very well. Our customers will not even realize that something like that happened to us because of our internal preparations, all right? And respond and stay safe during the emergency. We avoid downtime and we recover as fast as is possible. These are necessities that we really must consider, because these are the benefits that we will get, right? So summarizing the points, ability to respond quickly to disruptive incidences becomes the pillar of our preparation when it comes to emergency planning. So the rest of the items is business continuity plan. What do we need to have in there for us to be able to say that, yes, emergency-wise, we are good to respond? Impact assessment, which you've mentioned, reduction of exposure, which we have mentioned, mitigation guidelines, we must have them, political violence, work from home. Our internet is right. We have enough bandwidth to accommodate everybody that wants to access our network safely from all other areas, isn't it? Right? And our plan should address our kings and queens, customers, should address our supply chain, our suppliers, and even the utilities that we need and the resources that we need in our premises. Products, if we are taking products to the market, then we must have a plan. Traffic is being disrupted by these mass demonstrations. What is the alternative of getting our product into the market? Do we double stock our stockists, or what do we do? Consider all this. In terms of services, yeah, we must make sure that our service, at whatever cost, is not disrupted. And if it's disrupted, then we have a plan to make sure that the disruption is at minimal. It does not last for long. And when it goes for long, like our deputy president said, the first demo in Nairobi cost the economy of Kenya 20 billion Kenyan shillings. That's a lot of money. So we must put mitigators in place to reduce this, right? So at the end of this discussion, it is important that we develop strategies to reduce the risks and the potential impact. And that comes to emergency plan that we will activate in our next section of responding, right? Then we must plan for business continuity. And this involves critical operation areas of our business. I am not saying that the business and the operations are not critical. I'm saying they are critical, but we can classify them because of the research we identified and quantitatively gave numerical empirical figures to know that this is an area that is critical for our continuity. ICT will be very important because all ERPs run on an ICT-connected backbone, so that must be important, all right? Basically, building resilience. In our next discussion, in our next slide, basically talks about BC planning, business continuity planning, and I'll be able to elaborate this one when we interact more in our individual interaction, right? But these are the most important things: plans, measures, and arrangements that must be continuous and must be demystifying the impact of the risk of the emergency that we are facing. In the next slide, what we see, all right, is a good emergency response plan or an emergency plan, all right? It basically requires us to be able to have the capacity and the right backbone of handling these sudden unexpected situations. What are we saying? We are saying that none of them is planned for. They will not come at any particular time, right? They will just come. We know mass demonstrations are there, but we don't know what are the constituents or the ingredients that will come with this mass demonstration. So we must be prepared for them, right? Also, if we plan ahead, we'll be able to stop disaster from occurring in the first place. That is important. We plan to prevent, not prevent to plan. No, we plan to prevent, right? Then we will reduce the impacts of these emergencies, all right? For example, we can prevent fatalities and we can prevent injuries, and that reduces the impact to us, isn't it? Damage potential can also be reduced and quickly restore ourselves back to what we are meant to be and what objective we are meant to achieve at the end of the day. So the overarching principles, our biggest principle in emergency planning: plan, prepare, and practice. Create, exercise, and implement. That is our response planning, which we must at all times test and update. Thank you. Back to you, Lucy.
Thank you so much, Chris. Wow, this is really, really, really timely, as I said at the beginning. Learning a lot, especially about the business continuity plan. This is a must-have document or plan for every business owner. We must plan to prevent and not prevent to plan. And I've really learned a lot, especially on the BCP, the business continuity plan, that we must test the document. We must keep updating because the threats and the risks keep changing. And yeah, so it's really, really timely. And I'm sure that our clients will find this conversation very, very helpful. We do not have a question. I only had one question.
I do have a question.
Yes, please.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Let me first start by appreciating my good brother, Chris Otieno, and Lucy, the organizers, for this quick one. I do look after the gig economy. And in terms of the emergency response on the business side, I've had quite a number of cases where the e-hailing platform and the leaders have been championing for protests, strikes, demonstrations. Of recent cases, they happened 3 weeks ago, where they were demonstrating about the gig economy and the government and the NTSA. So, Chris Otieno, how do I mitigate surge in the gig economy? You spoke about other areas, but you didn't touch on the gig economy, which is key to the sector where we work in. So kindly just elaborate a few areas that I would be able to look at to prevent such protest and strikes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nguka. I'm really delighted and happy that yes, we are flowing together. And I'm happy to hear that yes, you are interested in the risk mitigation for your area. Now, we have mentioned the risks that is involved in transport and infrastructure sector. And for you to be able to respond to these kinds of emergencies, number one, Mr. Nguka, is for you to be able to identify these risks in your risk and threat assessment section, which of course is planning. Once you identify them and create business scenarios for all these items that you've identified as your risks and the scenarios, then you will be able to come up with what we are calling an emergency plan on how to respond to them. Let's take, for example, these political mass demonstrations that are going on. Number one, we have been through a number of elections in our country. I have voted around 25 times since I became an eligible voter. And we have seen a cycle of events that come up with the announcement of our election results. And one of them is demonstrations, either to say these elections were rigged, not just for Kenya, that's global, even in the US, we have the same kind of a thing. Then we are saying the next thing is that follows the mass demonstrations. Now, we know that the trickle-down effect of mass demonstrations, number one, is a slowdown or a slump in the economy of our nation. And I mentioned our president said we lost 20 billion first day, 2 or 20 billion the first time these demonstrations were. So what is your plan here, Job? If you are in that sector, what do? Do you stop operations? Do you have market intelligence or situational awareness out there to tell you these are the areas that you must avoid? If that is there, then what are you required? Create a liaison with the police. Let them tell you the areas that are critical. See what is happening in the press. Look at the areas that are being affected or not being affected. If you feel comfortable enough after categorizing your risk from these repercussions of elections, then you can either make a decision, let me go on or let me not go on. And we want to look at that in depth in our next section, which is responding to emergencies. And I will take your question as part of my response to really take the whole audience down on how to respond to emergencies. So allow me go through this section so that I can now crystallize that or break it down for you in the rightful way. We sat down to identify risks and threats. We came down to planning emergencies. Now we are sitting down in a real emergency. It has happened. What are we required to do? In this section, we're going to talk about an exercise of execution. Pre-event action that you must do. The first thing that must run through your head is the objective of an emergency response plan. And all this, we took care of it from the assessment to the planning, and now we want to execute the two at the point where we are. Number one is, how will I activate my response? At what point do I activate my response? For example, in the sector that Mr. Job Nguka is the transport sector, when will he activate his response plan? If you're in the healthcare environment, when do you activate your plan? If you're in the financial sector, when do you activate your plan? Think through. We're going to discuss that shortly. After activation of this plan, what is our capacity to respond? How are we programming ourselves to be able to respond to the activation that we've just agreed at the organization level to activate? Then what is our objective in activation? We must save life, and we must save property, and we must ensure continuity of business, and we must make sure that we are off at the shortest time possible, right? So first thing is evacuating from the point of danger or zone, yeah? Seek shelter in place or out of place. Implement a lockdown, close main shutoffs, call for aid if capacity is beaten, and gradually progress to standoff. This is the objective. Everything that we do must be a pointer to one of the elements that stand out as the objective of our emergency response plan. So this is what we do. We must, first of all, we spoke about selecting a team, and the team is there. They hold periodic meetings. We have written plans in place, and they have agreed on a number of stuff. Today, this particular team says, we must activate our plan because out there, something is not right. In here, something that we had identified as a scenario to be warranted to be called emergency has happened. So how do you activate? We must first of all agree. How do we activate our emergency response? If it is by sounders, then we must say, if you hear this sounder going on one time, that is a warning sign that we are about to go into an emergency that we shall need to manage as an organization. If you agree, if it sounds twice, then it means we are now in the active phase of an emergency response. Then everybody must be able to move in tandem with the sounders and the way they have been set. So every sounding, if that is the choice of an activation, must elicit appropriate or proportionate action from the team. All right. Then next thing is, before we determine or we activate our plan, we must say, for example, if we are a hospital, if we are going to receive 17 patients at one go, then that warrants to be called an emergency. If, for example, in the transport industry, if we are going to hear that 2 or 3 vehicles have been burned in mass demonstrations, or there's been loss of life of a driver in mass demonstration, that warrants us to activate our plan, then that will be it. All right. Then sounding pattern is spoken about. After that activation, after each sounding pattern that we are saying here, action must be followed. And the best is pre-event. For example, take one sounder. One sounder sound, that means Chris, Carol, Job, Lucy, and everybody who's listening, or everybody in this, for example, webinar, you need to do something. What is that something? Take my scorecard, which are my responsibilities, and revise them very fast so that when I go there, I know what I'm supposed to do. When that sounder sounds twice, then it means as a member of the committee that leads this organization in responding to emergencies, we have to assemble somewhere. So I must take a priority upon myself to go and assemble there, right? So moving now into the action or event phase, right? Every responder that you have apportioned responsibility at that particular point must now take action to lead the rest of the guys to where they are required. If they are required to evacuate to a certain assembly point, then this person must lead that organization in that direction. If they are required to count the number of blood that they have in their blood banks, then they must do that. If they are required to ensure that they are moving money from their safe to another area to save that money, then they must call the right service provider to move that money from their building or from their place of operation to the next alternative area, isn't it? Right? Then these actions must be coordinated. So there must be an incident commander, and below the incident commander, there must be other resourceful persons who will follow the instructions to make sure the incident commander achieves the objective of the organization at the end of the day of exercising the right items required by the organization for them to go through. And as we do this, you as the head of business, or you as the incident commander, there must be a flow of information. If I am the incident commander and Carol or Job is the owner of the business, then I must get information from what is happening on the ground and pass it to either Job and Carol to enable them in make the right decision to guide this organization. And if that is done and all actions are well coordinated, nobody's overstepping, nobody's understepping, we are coordinating, helping each other, responding as is appropriate and as is required, then we are all targeting one thing, right? Continuity in handling that active phase, yeah, with all our plan resources. Even in the instant where we are overrun by resources, we have a person, for example, from the supply chain, who is able to take care of our replenishment, so that we are moving as a block, and none of these critical departments in our response is being left behind. If we require cash, it is there. Finance department is there and ready with that cash. If we require other supplies, procurement has a right provider, alternative provider in the event that this one fails, right? So that basically means that when we are overwhelmed, we activate alternative site to further mitigate on the magnitude of these activities. And that will come from us, isn't it? right? And then when you have all handled these, and this information has gone to the incident commander, and the incident commander plus the committee have evaluated the action that we have taken, and they are satisfied that yes, what we have done is ample enough. If it's all these patients, they've been taken to the wards, and they have primary care nurse to take care of them, and secondary nurse, and things like that. If we have cash movement, all the cash has been put into boxes. The service provider is down there with security to receive them, transfer it to the next section, and all these things, when they are all in place and everything has moved on well, then you go to the post-event phase or active review after action review, right? This is basically happening in every area, in the planning, and now in the after response. We reflect, we identify gaps, we look at the best practice. If we are there to them or we did not. What lessons did we learn, right? To basically do what Lucy said as a take-home from this presentation, review and update our plan. So time for review must be set aside in the whole process of emergency management, all right? And in the next slide, back to you, Lucy, before we now introduce ourselves. Thanks for that. Back to you, Lucy.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris. We still continue to learn, especially on the BCP. That's my really take home, and I hope that everyone has learned that, especially if it's a new term to us. I have one question for you, Chris. How do you ensure that security measures are consistently applied across different business units or locations, particularly in a global organization with diverse cultures and practices?
The best thing to do and the best approach for that kind of a risk is to have a very formidable consultative structure. What do I mean by consultative structure? If we are a global entity, it is important that we have a global manager or a global director for our security department, to whom we have country security managers. And these country security managers, their responsibility will be to drive the security console of that country in respect to the regulations of the country, with respect to the culture of that country, and with respect to international best practice standards. If we approach that risk from that kind of a well-defined consolidated structure, then we will be capable to establish that every country has the right required standard per regulation requirements, and then all these regulations and requirements, they plug at the global level to the global director to have a plan for the organization at the global level. So my response to that question would be, the consultative structure must be gotten right as part of our planning. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. It's important to know that it doesn't matter how diverse our cultures are, BCP must be put in place and it will be applied as per our situations wherever we are. Another question, how do you balance the need for strong security measures with the need to maintain user accessibility and usability?
That's a very good question. We know that most of the time our security is restrictive, our security is intrusive. And these elements, when they are combined together, you find that security becomes a business disabler other than becoming a business enabler. And that kind of circumstance, what I would do as head of security and safety or as a risk consultant advisor or an advisor, yeah, I would mostly move my security from physical security to e-security. Have systems, electronic systems or e-systems that can easily supplement the work that can be done by a physical person. At times, the physical approach by physical persons, if not well trained, they become more restrictive, they become more intrusive, and our customers sometimes don't really like that. So my advice in that kind of a setup is to adapt, is to complement the human capital with e-capital. And the choice of my e-capital will also be determined by the kind of clients I receive, the number of clients that I receive, and my end objective, what I want to achieve with my system. If I put that in place, select my supplier right, select the system right, tailor-make the system capabilities right to my organization, then I believe the intrusive and the disabling nature of security changes to enabling and permissive nature of security, which is very good in responding to what our client has asked there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Well answered.
Can I add something on that, what Chris has just said?
Okay,
Can
go
I,
ahead, Job.
Can I, because
yes, Job.
Chris, my good friend, it is, you're telling us now, like, based on your advice, the physical guarding is not ideal to certain situations, so you will go to the electronic security, right? Remember, systems fail. Systems are bound to fail. And there are some tasks that systems cannot do. So in such a setup, would you still advise to synchronize the two, the physical and the e-security?
That's a tactical question and a very good question. I'm here. My response is this way. At no particular time did I advocate for replacement of a physical guard for electronic. I said they must be supplemented. They must complement one another. Even when you have an e-system in place, there must be a human capital to control that. They must have an operability of that system. So what am I saying here, Joe? You run that through the entire process that we've discussed here. Look at the risks that are associated with the human person being stood there and performing his duties, and at the same time, the bringing in of an e-system. What is the risk of the human person? What is the risk with an electronic system? If you put the two in the balance and find the qualitative and the quantitative risk of either of them surpasses the other, then you replace. Access control systems worldwide have been electronized, and they're doing very, very, very well, right? Which, for example, you can even complicate them. Use retina scans, use fingerprints and things to allow and combine all these so that they are working from an integrated platform that none is causing a failure to the other. And if they are to fail, it has to be fail secure. They are failing in a secure way. But if you anticipate that failure, then there must be a continuity plan that you put in place to make sure that we are secured against a longevity period for that system staying down like that, which could include, for example, a human person coming down there to operate the system or disabling the system and operating offline. And offline require you to station a human person. So we are saying there must be complementary, yeah, or between the two of them.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And I hope that's okay, Job, that your question is answered well. Chris, if you allow me, I'll give you 2 minutes to talk about who you are, so that we can wind up within the time period that we requested for, if you wouldn't mind.
We are a hub of consultants. And in our organization, we have consultants in risk, in security, in safety, in occupational health, and in environment management. They are all being led by myself. And we provide solutions in the same areas. And the solutions that we provide, for example, the assessment that we've done here, security, safety, health, occupational health, and environment assessments. We do mainstreaming of security and safety in organizations. And that falls to what Job has asked very well. How do you mainstream security in your organization for you to be able to achieve the enabling effect of security? We also conduct audits, compliance, and ethical solutions. We will give you that. But at the start of it is risk assessment, right? We prepare your business. We work with you to prepare your business for continuity. And we will help you help you in developing your risk, security, safety, health, and environment strategy, which really helps you plug in, for example, in compliance, regulatory and legal compliance, and all that, right? Because as an organization, we reckon that businesses are experiencing risks across this level. There are myriad risks that include opportunity destroyers that stretch your investment. Some of these risks will destroy your investment, right? So what do? Where we sit here, we are a group of think tanks. We sit with you and generate solutions and inputs that drive uniformity in securing and guiding your safety and security, occupational health, and environment. All right? We strengthen and we help you strengthen and enhance your disaster resilience. This is critical. We offer recommendations that focus on potential actions from prevention, protection, and mitigation. And let's look at how we approach these. Next slide. How do you approach these? What is the benefit of onboarding us? This is what you'll get in our own setup because of the number of consultants that we have in our organization. We will add value to your organization. We will add value from what we work as partners. Our consultants will be supportive and very rewarding. In us, they are quite experienced assessment and audit partners who give your organization the rest from the complexity of assessments. If you're going for new acquisitions, we are here to help you do a risk assessment of new acquisitions and make better decisions. If you are restructuring your organization, we are here to work with you, to give you the best strategies that you will use in approaching your restructuring. How do we do this? We diligently examine your unique environment, and we try as much as possible not to miss any critical item that leaves you still vulnerable, right? And in doing that, we create opportunity to anticipate potential risks. We address, we treat, we mitigate and prevent risks from crystallizing. And when you do that, you will realize the end results, which is the reduction in the potential impact of these risks and losses, and even preventing those risks from occurring in the first place. So globally, we are saying that we work in partnership with you to ensure that your business and yourself are ready to face the threats, to confidently face the threats that are there in the current business environment to enable you proactively protect your organization. And the other items that we do in the next slide, for example, right? Our concept of operation, for example, we'll do a review. We do this on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly basis. We review security, we review safety, political and business environment. According to the risk that is there, that is emerging, we do an evaluation of that. And then what I've written, there's just an evaluation, a short evaluation of what we do, right? And we've identified that right now, what are the focus areas for us in the economy, right? Encouraging private sector, weak private sector investment. That is affecting our economy, yeah? And of course, the president came out yesterday and said, Moderna, we're ready to sign this to encourage private sector investment, right? We also look at the sectors that strain this, right? We look at the war in Ukraine. We look at the political differences, the political environment in every country. We look at cross-border relationships. We look at travel restrictions. We look at the effects of the adverse weather. We look at the next items in our business review, and we contextualize all that, right? And in doing that, we've been able to capture all these sectors of our economy and be able to come with a very good plan, which we have identified up, which is shared up there, breaking down all the risks that are there. For now, what we have settled on, what we are advising our clients for now is these inherent and emerging risks, right? Pandemic, we are just coming from this coronavirus, and the effect has been rippled, and in many ways, right? These are increased the poverty numbers in our organization, I mean, in the country, right? There's been a lot of business interruptions of these policies, changing policies. There are also threats from terrorism across the globe. There are political risks, violence that are there happening in our country right now, yeah, and neighboring countries, and even in the global sector. So how do we do this? At the end of the day, we can't do this, but we can't do this by ourselves. So we partner with you. We ask you to give us the opportunity to sit down with you and look at this from a global perspective, right? We bring in industry standards in our consultations. We build capacity in your organization by working with selected persons, right? And we give you the confidence to begin your compliance journey in terms of risk response and planning, right? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for listening to me. If any of you wishes to contact us or me in whatsoever way, these are our lines. And you look at our lines, the way we structure them, the emergency lines, the consultation lines, the WhatsApp consultation lines, their email addresses, and we are on Twitter. Please follow us, like our page, talk to us, and let's work together to really ensure that we are running this business in the right way. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow.
Thank you, Lucy, the moderator, and thank you, Springboard Capital, for this wonderful opportunity for us to bring up a level of awareness in the business sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chris. I was going to ask about the contact, because it's imperative that people need to reach out to you, and because of the topic of the day, very, very, very timely. Thank you so much. I hope our audience can be able to take up the numbers that are displayed. For our audience, Springboard Capital is a microfinance company that has transformed lives by offering financial services to individuals and businesses for the past decade. Yes, we've been in existence for over 10 years. We offer loans that save you money, and we are focused on putting customer convenience at the center of our processes. We believe in building relationship that goes beyond traditional financial lending and results in a more valuable partnership where there is mutual benefit. Kindly share your name and contact on the WhatsApp link that has been shared on the chat, and we shall engage you on our financial product offerings. You can find us in our town branch at Kagen House, first floor. Thika, we are at Sawa House, first floor. Our head office is at CPA Center on Thika Road, opposite Survey on third floor. We are also in Kisii and Meru at Mbaya Karichu building, opposite Kimiri House, Kirikuri Road, and our latest outlet at Rungai, Emmanuel Building, next to Mayan Mall. We are also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn as Springboard Capital. Our website is www.springboardcapital.co.ke. Thank you very much for tuning in. See you in the next month of the last Friday. Have a blessed weekend. Thank you so much.